We've all been there where somebody's making you so mad you want to claw their face off. These are the colours, I would swear by it. I was kind of doing something like there, if that's all right. This week, I really need to focus on locking in on my TBR. I've actually timed this quite nicely because there's exactly 1 week of the month left, and throughout April I have been participating in Magical Readathon. It's my favourite readathon of all time, and at this point in the month I'm already done with my call-in, which is practically unheard of, but I feel like the prompts of Magical Readathon this year, the ones that I actually needed to achieve, were quite kind to me in that I did have books that I could very easily use to fulfill the prompts, but they weren't kind to me in terms of actually being able to utilize the books on my TBR to fulfill the prompts that I needed. So while this month is shaping up to be my best reading month of the year in terms of at least the amount of books that I've read, I haven't actually made that much of a dent in the books that I was supposed to read. So throughout this week, I'm essentially just going to try and get through as many of those as possible before we hit the end of the month. I do have one book that I 100% need to read as soon as possible, and I also have an audiobook that I'm in the middle of, but the book that I'm actually going to be starting off with is for my Patreon 24-hour readathon, which starts at 6 p.m. this evening. And for that readathon, I generate a prompt from one of my Bookopoly boards. The prompt for this month is a book with a simple cover. So I've decided to read one of my arcs for this because I feel like arcs always have a more basic, like simplified version of the normal cover. And I'm going with Fem Feral by Sam Messenger, which has just been released. And this one is, I think it's going to be like a satirical novel more than it is a solid fantasy about a woman who is going through perimenopause, and she is comparing this to turning into a werewolf. So this one was sent to me by Bloomsbury in my welcome package when I became an ambassador for Bloomsbury Archer. So thank you so much to Bloomsbury for that. This one feels a little bit outside of my comfort zone because it feels more like a literary or speculative fiction that only kind of falls into the fantasy genre because of the message that it's trying to convey. But I am actually quite interested to see the comparison that the author draws in here. Humor can be very hit or miss for me, but I feel like going into this knowing it's a little bit of a satire is going to help me out. So I'm not 100% sure that this one is going to work for me, but I am definitely interested enough to give this one a try. It sounds just a little bit different to what I typically read, which honestly a lot of the time I find quite refreshing.
Welcome. I'm Olivia, and this is your 30-minute pop punk ride.
So I just got off sprints with my patrons. It is very nearly 11 p.m. And, considering we've been sprinting for the last nearly 5 hours, I have not read as much of this as maybe I should have. We have had a bit of a chatty stream though. We were going off on tangents left, right and center. So I feel like that is the main reason why I'm only 106 pages into this one. But I am enjoying this one a lot more than I expected, given the direction that this one is taking. So our main perspective in here is Ellie, and she's 44 years old. And we meet her as she has been hit by a bicycle. She walked into the bike path on her phone and she got knocked down. She cut her head, but she's on her way to work for this important meeting. So she kind of shakes herself off, patches herself up and goes on her way. And the reason why this meeting at work is so important today is because she is about to be promoted to the CEO position of a company that she has worked at since its inception. However, at the last minute, to everyone's surprise, this random guy is brought into the company and promoted above her her, and she is promoted to the title of like CPO. And it's very clear that this guy has no idea what he's doing. He's never worked in a tech company before, and he was brought in to provide fresh ideas. So after this meeting, Ellie's boss, who notices that, you know, she's bleeding from her skull, tells her to go home and to rest. So she goes to the doctor, and he asks her about her symptoms, how she's been feeling recently, and he declares that she is in perimenopause. So her hot flushes, her fatigue, her like slight memory loss, her forgetfulness, all of this is due to perimenopause. However, we very quickly realize in here, I mean, obviously based on the synopsis, what this book is about is potentially actually the fact that she's turned into a werewolf that's causing all of these symptoms, as opposed to the perimenopause. And each chapter from Ellie's perspective in here has a title of a menopausal symptom. So the next one that I'm about to get to is called generalized anxiety, which, you know, I could tell you a thing or two about that with or without perimenopause. But the interesting thing about this book actually is that we have a secondary perspective that I did not expect, and that is Brenda. And Brenda is this crotchety, rude old lady in her 80s. She lives in a rented flat in London. She's seen some shit across her life. And while our main character of Ellie is middle class, Brenda is no such thing. She's also losing her eyesight a little bit, and as we meet her, she is about to go to the DVLA to kind of prove that she can see enough to drive, which, let me tell you, she absolutely cannot. And before she goes to that meeting, she's looking for her cat, and unfortunately for Brenda, she does indeed find her cat torn in half on her neighbor's doorstep. So I will give you a content warning here. If you do not want to read about cats and other small animals being chomped in half, potentially by a werewolf, I would maybe skip this one, because Brenda's perspective in here is investigating the string of animal deaths that all happened between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. on one particular day, when Ellie just happened to be walking around in the middle of the night in her bathrobe before she blacked out. To be honest, the cat content in here is a little bit gory, which I really didn't expect. I would say that the way it's discussed is in the same tone as like a murder mystery, where it's like, oh no, this man has been stabbed to death, and then we kind of skip over all the sentimentality of that and like go into the possible list of suspects and the motives for murder and that kind of thing. So I feel like that is the way that it's discussed in here. And also Brenda's perspective definitely has like a British crime drama lean to it, because now not only is she investigating the deaths of these animals, she has an unexperienced young apprentice police officer as her sidekick, who has been kind of foisted on her by the police force, who think that she's a laughingstock. They don't have time to investigate this string of missing cats. So to appease her, they've given her this like really unexperienced guy who's like pretty much a kid to help her in her investigation, and the juxtaposition between them that I'm getting is really quite funny. I am actually really enjoying the humor in this as well. I feel like a lot of it is really sarcastic. This is a book that is undoubtedly British, and that very much comes across in the characterization of our two characters, which is great because humor is sometimes a huge miss for me, but I feel like it's because I do have a very sarcastic British sense of humor myself, so humor more along those lines works for me a lot better. But something that this book is making me feel that I really didn't expect is angry. The men in this book, like, I knew that this was going to be at least somewhat feminist. I mean, it's about perimenopause and we're comparing that to shifting into a werewolf, but the men in here are awful, and not even all of them are like horrible men. They're not horrible people at all, but I feel like this book does a really good job of putting us in the perspective of especially Ellie, and she's agitated, she's irritated, she's too hot, she's itchy, she's anxious, she's tired. And I feel like something in the narrative is really making me feel those things when I'm reading from her perspective. And I find the men around her, if not infuriating, which some of them are, at the very least incredibly frustrating. So as she is getting more and more agitated by them, I too am getting more and more agitated by them. So definitely a more engrossing read than I anticipated at this point. I do feel like where I'm at now, I mean, this is a Bloomsbury Arch matcha title. So I am going to assume that Ellie is indeed a werewolf, and that is a fact. But right now, I feel like it could just be that Ellie actually is perimenopausal, and all of these symptoms are being very exaggerated because they're from her perspective, so they seem exaggerated as she's experiencing them. And Brenda could just be following a completely different thread. I don't think that's going to be the case, like I said, because it is published as a fantasy book, so I feel like it is going to be like literally fantastical and not just kind of like alluded to. But I'm excited to kind of see where it goes, because like Brenda is investigating Ellie, essentially, like the cats, I'm assuming, are Ellie's doing when she blacked out and she shifted into a werewolf. So I really have no idea how this book is going to resolve. Good evening, my guys. I am not in the most comfortable position I've ever been in right now because I have Kami splayed out across my legs and I can't move. But I know you guys always advocate for me suffering for her comfort, so that is what I'm going to continue to do. But I think you're falling off. Don't do that. It's not healthy. But I wanted to bring you guys a little bit of a check-in on Fem Feral because my readathon ended about 4 hours ago now. I haven't read anything since though, and during the 24 hours I made it 244 pages into this one, so I have just over 100 pages to go, and you know, I'm still really enjoying it, if I'm being honest. I feel like my momentum has slowed down a little bit because now I'm kind of just like wondering where we're going with this, and one of the perspectives that we're following has tapered off a little bit, especially at the point that I'm currently at. Where I'm at right now, because of how infrequent those chapters have now been, I'm kind of like, what was the point with that perspective? Is it going to come back? Are we going to see more of it? But I did also come to the realization, I mean, I say that, I checked on Goodreads, that this falls more into the horror genre than it does fantasy or paranormal. And now that I've realized that, it does make a lot of sense, especially with how gruesome and also unpleasant this book is to read in parts. And I've also adjusted my expectations with this in mind, because I was expecting this not to wrap up necessarily in a happily ever after, but I am hoping for some sort of like positive resolution, or I was expecting one. And now that I know that it's more in the horror genre, I feel like I'm not expecting it to go in as much of a pleasant direction as I initially thought that it was going to, which I do feel like it is still going to wrap up in a positive way overall. But given all of the events of the book so far, it's not going to be a like perfect wrapped in a bow ending. I don't think that's possible at this point. It's wild as well that I'm actually enjoying this one, because I never ever would have picked this up if it wasn't for the fact that it was sent to me. I don't think I'd ever have read this, because perimenopause, which is the majority of what this book is about, is not something I can relate to. It is something that is coming for me in the future, and that in itself is horrific, and I'm not surprised I'm reading a horror novel about it. It's a scary thought, but currently at the point I'm at in my life, it's not something that I can relate to. But just because I'm not perimenopausal, that doesn't mean that there isn't so much about womanhood in this book that I relate to, which actually is really unfortunate, because we're following a character who is under a lot of pressure, and the pressure is building and building and building, and she's so incredibly frustrated that the symptoms of perimenopause, the symptoms of being a werewolf, are heightening all of this frustration that she's already feeling, and culminating in these big like expressive outbursts of emotion, like usually anger. And the things that are driving her there, like I can honestly relate to. There's this whole scene where she goes to the doctors, and honestly it filled me with rage, because she goes to the doctors with all of her like menopausal symptoms, and instead of like offering her some sort of medication to help, they say like, why don't you try hormone cream, which is a topic that is especially sensitive for me. It was a true story to start off with. It says in the acknowledgements that the author pulled this from a story that her friend told her about her own medical experience, but I can give you guys another one, because my mum died 8 years ago of ovarian cancer, and she went to the doctors because she was bleeding, and they said to her, why don't you try some hormone cream? Now my mum was 65, she'd been through the menopause or started the menopause 20 years before this. So like she hadn't been bleeding in a long time. And at her age, that in itself is a red flag. But they said, why don't you try some hormone cream? And you know, my family, myself included, I got this from my mama, we don't go to the doctors for nothing. Like if I'm at the doctors, it's because there's something actually wrong with me. I'm not going for every little niggly thing. And my mum was exactly the same. So she persevered with this hormone cream for months and absolutely nothing changed. And when she went back, they finally took her seriously. They put her in for a series of scans, and it turns out she had ovarian cancer, but it also turns out that it was too late. And actually, when you're experiencing any symptoms of ovarian cancer, it is typically already too late. So the fact that she had those symptoms, had sat with them for a while, they didn't go away, she went to the doctors, was given hormone cream, it didn't go away obviously, so she had to go back to the doctors. All of that extra time was added on to the fact that it was already probably too late, and obviously resulted in the worst possible outcome. So yeah, like I can relate to a lot of the topics that are infuriating our main character in this book. They're infuriating me as well. Like so much of her experience is relatable even without the perimenopause. And this is obviously a little bit of a feminist novel with the shift of our main character turning into a werewolf, feeling like the ultimate expression of releasing her frustration and being able to take out her frustration in actual physical, tangible ways against the people who are responsible for all of this frustration. It's a little bit of wish fulfillment, if you will, because like we've all been there where somebody's making you so mad you want to claw their face off. And in this book, our main character actually gets to do that, which is quite nice to read. And I'm feeling a whole range of emotions in this book. I'm laughing sometimes, I'm filled with rage at other times. I do have quite a bit of squeamishness. I have medical anxiety, which actually stemmed from this whole thing that happened with my mum, where she went to the doctors with a problem and it was ignored, and it ended up to be this like huge thing. That is the cause of my medical anxiety. So prior to that, like I used to enjoy things like the Saw films, and now I absolutely can't do it. I'm way too squeamish. Anything to do with bodies really freaks me out. And there was some like medical related stuff in here that really gave me the ick. So yeah, I've been feeling the whole range of emotions through this one, which I mean is good, because when I read, I want to feel things, you know, and this is doing the job. So I just finished Fem Feral by Sam Messenger, and considering that this is very outside of the norm for me, it's very different to my typical reads, I actually really enjoyed this one and I ended up giving it 4 stars. I did really enjoy the writing style and also the character perspectives that we got in here. I was completely kind of blindsided by the recurring perspective we had of Brenda, who is our elderly character who is hunting for the person who is responsible for murdering all of the cats. And honestly, I think that her perspective was my favorite, because our main perspective of Ellie, you know, she is not the most likable character. A lot of the things that are going wrong in her life are things that theoretically she has the power to change. And I understand why she feels like she is unable to make that change, and the way that society has conditioned her to accept these things in her life that are making her unhappy. But it can be frustrating to read from her in times. Like, for example, her husband is extremely passive and she is continuously frustrated by him, but she won't tell him that he's not pulling his weight, that he should be taking up more responsibility because he's a nice guy. And this ultimately leads to their relationship degrading throughout the course of this book, because she feels like she's being too harsh or aggressive or unfair to communicate that he should be doing more, or that he's not fulfilling her needs, or he's not kind of like pulling his weight around the house. The character of Brenda, however, while I loved her, she did make me incredibly sad. At 84 years of age, like she straight up says, like in her second chapter, I've never had anybody who would call me a friend. Her family are tired of her, nobody wants to talk to her, and she's had a hard life as well. And I think for somebody to have gone through so much hardship and to get so late in life and be so incredibly lonely is just so heartbreaking, especially because I know that this is the case for a lot of older people out there. So I really empathized with her throughout her perspective, and just because she's a little crotchety, a little straight talking, a little too honest, maybe loses her temper a little too frequently, doesn't doesn't mean that she's not deserving of love, you know? So it's really sad to see how she really just doesn't have anything going on, which further propels her into this investigation because she feels like it's the only thing that she can do to really make a difference, especially as she's meeting all of these people who have been affected by this string of animal deaths, and the way that she wants to resolve this for them, but also to solve this great injustice that she's seeing when nobody else will help her because nobody perceives this issue to be important. And as a character that has experienced so much injustice in her life, she kind of doesn't want to see that done to other people. I'm not sure if this is a book that I would recommend, honestly, because I don't know who I would recommend it to, because it is something that is very different from what I typically read. I don't know what the target audience for this would be. I don't feel like there's anything I can effectively compare it to be able to say, like, if you're a fan of this book or this type of book, then you would enjoy this one. And because I didn't actually expect to like it as much as I did myself, I do think that that has kind of thrown me through a loop as well. So if anything I've said sounds interesting to you, then do maybe consider picking this up. I do understand why a lot of people wouldn't like this. I think the writing style, while I enjoyed it, can be maybe a little bit cringy in places, and as well as that, I think the unlikability of the characters, as well as some of the more unpleasant elements of this book, like the animal deaths and the gruesomeness of that. There's also some kind of like grim health and body stuff in here. I would say that it does firmly fall more into the category of horror than anything else, so I feel like that is kind of part and parcel with the genre in some ways. But I would also urge you to look up a full list of content warnings if you're going into this. Some of them, as I have mentioned, are things like animal death, but there's also like assault, stalking, and a bunch of other stuff going on here as well. But I'm so glad that I read this one. I haven't decided if I'm going to keep it yet. I think that I want to, but I also don't think I'll ever reread this again. And I also don't think it's going to be one that I pull out regularly for recommendation videos, because as you guys can tell, like, I don't really know who to recommend it to. But I guess we'll see. I'll sit on it for a month or so, and if it's a book that I'm still thinking about, then it has definitely earned a place on my shelves. But this one I have used for a magical readathon prompt. It's pretty much the last one that I can get with books on my TBR, which is animal studies, to read a book that is featuring wolves in some way, which this one definitely does. And I've also managed to get this onto my Our Fantasy Bingo TBR for a prompt that I do have a book that fits for it, so I would have been able to hit it had I read that book, but it is one that is a little bit more difficult for me to hit organically, so I'm glad that I've done that early. And it is the older protagonist prompt, which is to read a book that has a main character that is older than 50. And it does also fulfill hard mode, which is that the character has to have a regular human lifespan and not be immortal or some sort of like creature that has an elongated lifespan. So with the character of Brenda, who is our second most dominant character in this book and is 84 years of age, I've also managed to fulfill that. And I've ticked a book off my TBR. So because I am focused on knocking as many books off my TBR as possible during this vlog, I thought I would let you guys know what situation we're dealing with here. So on my spreadsheet, it says that this year so far, I've entered 29 books onto the TBR section of my spreadsheet. I will admit I have just taken one off, because I've already taken it off there as well. I had Wicked Fox by Kat Cho on my TBR that was specifically for my South Korea trip, and I didn't get to it. I read The God and the Gumiho, but I didn't get to Wicked Fox, so I'm no longer going to be prioritizing that. So I've removed it from the spreadsheet, but I've entered 29 books so far this year, and with Fem Feral, I have now read 18. So I'm currently 11 books behind, and tomorrow I'm going to be filming my May TBR, which will add another 7 books to the TBR. So yeah, I'm hoping that throughout this vlog and maybe next week, I'm not sure what I'm doing next week yet, I'll be able to focus on my TBR and knock a good amount of books off so that I can free up my reading for a little bit more mood reading. Actually, there's a ton of stuff that I want to read that I'm kind of putting to the side to catch up on the things that I should have already read, essentially. But speaking of books I should have already read, the next book I'm tackling is going to be on my Kindle. I don't know how much battery I have in this, so should probably check that. 50%, which to be fair will last me a good long while. But I'm going to be reading my Patreon book club pick technically for last month. I think my plan is to read book 3, which I should have read in March this week, and then to read book 4, which I should be reading this month next week, so that we can wrap it up, because next month for my Patreon is the month where we're going to have the live show for the whole series and also select our next series that we're going to be starting. But the book that I'm going to be starting right now is Fem Furies by Helen Shorrow, which is book 3 in the Legends of Thesmar series. I have been procrastinating on this one a little bit because I did not love book 2 in the series, which was Vows and Ruins, and I also did not love the standalone that intersects with the Legends of Thesmar story, which is Slaying the Shadow Prince. I did know that I wasn't going to love Slaying the Shadow Prince, or that it was unlikely, because I'm not a big fan of like romantic standalones. And book 2, I'm so thankful to whoever warned me in the comments that book 2 is more smut heavy than any other book in the series, because knowing that we kind of get back on track in book 3 is the only thing that is keeping me in this series right now after the last 2 books by Helen Shorrow that I've read. So I am hoping that this is going to take it back to the plot a little bit more and be a little bit more in line with what I loved about the first book, which is Blood and Steel. So this series is an indie romance series, and it is following a young woman called Thea who wants nothing more than to be one of the legendary warriors of Thesmar. However, there is a prophecy in this world that says that a woman who wields a blade is going to bring about the end of days, and so the royalty, the governing bodies of the world, have decreed that women shall no longer be warriors. So all of the established warriors were stripped of their ranks and women are no longer allowed to train. However, Thea finds herself in a position to petition the royalty to become an exception to this law, and they do grant her access to the training academy, where she is pushed into close contact with the surliest and most reclusive of the Legends of Thesmar, Wilder Hawthorne. And it's a romantasy, so you can probably see where it's going to go. So I need to make a spoiler video for this that I want to go up onto Patreon before the end of the month, which is like Thursday, I think. So I need to get a wriggle on with this. It is under 500 pages though. The last 2 books are shorter than the rest. Oh, it's giving me locations. Oh, I hate that. Don't do that. Okay, if I go into the chapters, it's still giving me locations. Let me look at how big the print copy is on Amazon. 466 pages. Okay, that's bigger actually than I thought it was, so I am gonna have to lock in, because as well as filming and editing, etc., this coming week, I'm also going to be prepping the walls, like the fill-in and stuff, in the spare bedroom, so that we can paint and kind of like get that back together as soon as possible. And for that project, I'm going to be listening to an audiobook. So maybe not so much physical reading time this week, and physical reading time is what I need to make progress in this book. Yesterday, I managed to read about 150 pages of Fem Furies, and I can confirm that I'm enjoying it a little bit more than I did book 2 and also Slaying the Shadow Prince. Slaying the Shadow Prince, I don't necessarily think is a bad book if romantasy standalones are your thing. They are very much not my thing though, which is why I didn't enjoy that one. So it's nice to get back into the series, get back into the storyline. We have nowhere near as much smut as we did in book 2, which is nice, because I mean, it started off pretty sexually charged, shall we say, book 2 that is, and it just like continued to progress throughout that entire book. But due to the nature of the plot, that has been completely knocked back, and we are kind of still focusing on our 2 main characters, but also we're getting a little bit more depth to the plot, a little bit more explanation. I don't necessarily think that you need to read Slaying the Shadow Prince to read this one. I do think reading Slaying the Shadow Prince, knowing it's connected to this series, may spoil a couple of little bits about it, but all of the information that I wanted to get from Slaying the Shadow Prince, I'm now getting in Fem Furies. So for me, that standalone was completely unnecessary. I mean, I knew it wasn't required. I just thought it would maybe add a little bit more dimension or divulge a couple of little nuggets of information that you wouldn't get if you didn't read that one. And so far, everything that you actually need to know and actually adds value to the plot and the world is still contained in Fem Furies. This series does also continue to read incredibly quickly. I wouldn't say it's the most absorbing read, in that I'm not incredibly engrossed when I'm reading it, but I do think that it goes by like really quickly, which is how I managed to read so much yesterday in just a couple of hours. So I'm going to be continuing on with that today. I'm hoping to finish it tomorrow so I can get my spoiler vlog up on the last day of the month. But this afternoon, I need to work on my Patreon bookmark, which I will be sending at the beginning of May. So I need to get it in for print. And while I do that, I'm going to be listening to the audiobook of the last book that I hope to get through this month, which is Wolfsong by TJ Klune. So this is my longest standing Patreon pick on my TBR. I haven't necessarily procrastinated on picking this up, but it is very easy to keep putting off because before I started this, I really did not know how I was going to feel about it. I've enjoyed TJ Klune from the past, but werewolf stories, they're not something that I particularly care about. And unfortunately, already being 200 pages into this, 235 pages in, I am enjoying the audiobook, so I think I'm going to continue at least for the time being. I just don't actually think I like the book very much. I was warned that there's a little bit of an uncomfortable relationship in this series by a bunch of people in my comments, so I went in kind of aware of that, but I think the fact that there is a little bit of an age gap in the romance and also the circumstances, the way that the relationship is initiated is very uncomfortable, and it's definitely contributing to my lack of enjoyment to this one. But I also just really don't love the family at all in this. We're essentially following a young boy and his father is abusive to his mother. He also says a lot of like emotionally abusive things to his son that he doesn't really realize are as harmful and shitty as they are. Essentially, he's called Ox. His name is Oxnard, and his father tells him he's dumb as an ox, which is something that he takes with him throughout his entire life. And his father leaves one day and this family moves in next door. And Ox and his mother are now really struggling to get by. So Ox is working alongside studying to help ends meet, and his mother obviously also has a job. So this family that moves in are rich, and Ox stumbles across them one day and ends up befriending them, and they kind of take him in, which is absolutely fine. But I feel like the way that things develop later down the line, the way that Ox has kind of like an obligation to this family almost, and it is like a kind of found family situation. Like, he's not helping them because they're forcing him to, he's helping them because he considers them to be family. But I just feel like there is a lot of pressure put on this young boy. I think he's 16 when they first meet him, and they kind of take him in, make him part of their family, but they put such immense pressure and responsibility on him. And I think that the issue that I have is that they were aware of the circumstances with which they would need him at the time of their relationship beginning, whereas he had no idea that any of this stuff was going to unfold. He had no idea that this family were werewolves, and now he has all of this responsibility that he feels obligated to uphold because he cares about them, because he feels indebted to them, because he considers them as family. And that is not a relationship that he knew he was entering at the beginning, where they knew obviously a lot more about their circumstances and what role he may need to fulfill in their family. I do also think that this reads a lot like alternate universe Twilight fan fiction, where the Cullen family are werewolves instead of vampires. Literally from the second that I met this family, especially when we get to the point where they're presented as a family, I think there's 4 brothers and then the parents, it is given Twilight. Like, so much. Like, these are the Cullens, I would swear by it. And I also don't especially love the writing in here. There's a lot of repetition, things like recurring themes that keep cropping up throughout the book. A lot of them can be phrases that like Ox's father said to him that, like I said, have stuck with him through his entire life. But also, I can't remember if this is true of all TJ Klune books. I don't think he has the most elaborate, lengthy sentences in his writing style. That's just not who he is as a writer. But I do find that a lot of the writing in here is very short, blunt statements, and it's just not really working for me, and it can also become quite irritating in that way. Like, I'm just really not enjoying the way that this is written. I do also think that this is really heavy on the traumatic aspects of it, which I don't know why is causing me an issue in this book in particular, because I have no issue with books that contain traumatic content or characters that have to carry trauma, but I just think that there's something in the way that Ox in particular carries his trauma and the way that it's presented makes me feel kind of uncomfortable, and I don't really know how to explain it. I don't know whether it's because we also have this added dimension of Ox kind of being pulled into this family that then put so much responsibility on him. And it's quite obvious that he is very vulnerable because of his situation. Like, there's only him and his mother. He doesn't really have any friends. There's a couple of older guys that he hangs around with him that have helped out in his father's absence, but he has no peers. He has a terrible sense of self-worth. Like, he really thinks that he's stupid and he's dumb and that he doesn't deserve any goodness in his life. And this is something that plays a key part of his psyche and also keeps coming up. And then I think maybe paired with the fact that this family not intentionally take advantage of him, the way that it's presented to me, the way that I'm interpreting it, is that they're taking advantage of him, doesn't sit quite right with me. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be continuing on with this one, like in terms of the series. I'm interested to kind of see where the rest of the books go. I don't know actually, because I do think that there is an element of this book that does read kind of fan fiction-y. It really just does feel like Twilight, but with werewolves instead of vampires to me. Even with the ways that some of the conflict is arising and the main antagonists of this book are turning up, really feels like Twilight to me. So I might find that when I turn my attention to this more solidly, because at the minute this is just the audiobook that I listen to when I listen to audiobooks, but if I'm going to try and get it done by the end of the month, then obviously I'm going to try and ramp up the pace. And I do feel like there's a chance that it's going to get to a point where I just don't really want to continue with this one, because it is such a long book as well. I'm over 40% of the way through and I'm only on page 236. I've got so much still to go. So it is the last day of April, which feels wild to say. I feel like it was 2 minutes ago that it was the end of February and I was looking forward at everything that I needed to do to prepare to go to South Korea. And now we're almost in May. And it's almost summer. How does this happen? I know people say this all the time, like, where does the time go? But I mean, like, honestly, where does the time go? But as it is the end of the month, I feel like we should check in and see where I'm at with everything, because my goal for this vlog, obviously, was to get through everything that I was currently reading before the end of the month. And I mean, here we are. So in terms of Fem Furies, I am nearly done with this. No doubt that I will finish this today. I'm 83% of the way in, which works out at 373 pages. So I have about 70 pages to go. I am actually really enjoying this one. I have skipped a chapter though, because we had 2 sex scenes back to back. And I was like, honestly, I don't need this. Like, I've read sex scenes before. Nothing new is happening in this. So I just went ahead and skipped a whole chapter. But aside from that, we're actually progressing the relationship outside of the sex scenes. We have all of the different factions and sides in this world actually coming together to present a united force against the main threat. And this is not my favorite romantasy series by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's especially difficult as well because the last book that I finished, like before this vlog, was Rise of the Starling by Devney Perry, which is a new god tier romantasy series to me. I don't know if I've said it in this vlog. If I have, I apologize, but honestly, I love that series. And so following it up with a romantasy that does fall into the trap of a lot of things that I'm kind of tired of in the romantasy genre is a little bit difficult. And obviously I'm enjoying this one a little bit less because it's off the back of something that I gave 5 stars. But I do think that this is decent if you are somebody who just loves romantasy and you're okay with kind of reading very similar things over and over and over again. Like, this doesn't, I think, push the bar in any way, shape or form, but like, it's enjoyable. So I'm having a much better time with this than I was book 2 and the standalone, and I'm hoping to finish that last 17% this afternoon. Now, my other book, Wolfsong by TJ Klune, I plastered a wall yesterday. Is it the best plastering you've ever seen in your life? No. Does it have a couple of lumps and bumps on it that I'm gonna have to sand down when it's dry? Absolutely. And fingers crossed it doesn't crack. It's too early to tell at this point, but I did the damn thing. After the disaster that was my bathroom, that still is my bathroom, I was honestly just bored of workmen. And I didn't want to go through the process again of waiting 3 weeks for someone to give me a quote, to wait 3 weeks for them. If the 3 weeks is like a good estimation as well, for them to come and do a job, when realistically I can get away with just plastering one wall in that room and patching the rest up with filler. This has actually come at a really good time because it's forcing me to actually try things and expand upon my skills as a DIY homeowner, because I'm so annoyed with treaties after my bathroom experience. So I did that myself. Great learning curve. And I listened to about 10% of Wolfsong while I was doing that. I could have listened to a lot more, but I needed to concentrate quite a bit, so I kept pausing it. But I also continued and finished up the chapter I was in the middle of this morning as well. And I do think that I am going to be DNFing this one because I am just passively enjoying it. If you asked me to give you a list of the things that I like and the things that I'm not enjoying about this book, I could write you a lengthy list of things that I don't like. And the only thing that I do like about it is that it's a okay listening experience, and that's nothing to do with the book. That's more the audio narration. But as I have already gone into great detail about, I don't like the writing in here. There are a lot of elements of the story that I don't like. And honestly, I don't think that this is a bad book. I think if it's something that sounds interesting to you, then you'll probably enjoy it a lot more than I will. But this to me reads like T.G. Klune's take on a classic paranormal story, the kind of stuff that we were reading, or if you're my age, we were reading in our teens, like Fallen by Lauren Kate, The Wolves of Mercy Falls, Twilight. It has so many hallmarks of that kind of story, that very typical 2005 to 2012-ish, because that's I think when dystopian came in, young adult paranormal romance. And I don't like that. I did back in the day. I was obsessed with it back in the day, but looking back on it, it makes me cringe a little bit. Which I don't like saying things like that, because I know a ton of you guys love paranormal romance, and I don't want to make you feel like you should feel the way that I feel if you enjoy books like this. But yeah, it just, I don't know, it reminds me of all of those cringy teenage feelings that I had at the time when I was reading books like this, and I feel like it just really takes me back to that place. And so even the things about this that don't make me feel uncomfortable, that like I've talked about, the rest of it, I don't know, I'm just not having a good time. This is just not a book for me, I don't think. So I knew going into this that there was potential that I wouldn't enjoy it, because I don't like paranormal romance and I don't like werewolves especially. And this has just proven to kind of fall into all of the elements of those things that I don't enjoy. And I did predict that because of those things, like this maybe wouldn't be for me. And lo and behold, it isn't. So, I mean, I made it so far. I'm like 60% of the way into this. I'm on page 334, but this is my stopping point, I'm afraid. So my goal for the rest of the day is to finish this one and get my spoiler vlog up on Patreon, and then come and let you guys know my final thoughts. So I finished my book and I'm really happy where this one ended. I feel like it leaves potential for the stakes to actually be high in book 4, which I feel like is something that we actually haven't really had throughout this series, and it's something I've been complaining a lot about regarding the romantasy genre, especially recently, because I've got to a point where I don't really believe anything that I've read. I feel like it's all giving the illusion of the stakes being high, but we never really have any consequences. There's never really any casualties. But based on a couple of hints we had towards the end of book 3 and our like final note of the book, I don't know how this series is going to wrap up as a whole. That being said, I'm also pretty sure that, you know, it's all going to be all right in the end, because it usually is, but maybe it won't be, and that's exciting. Saying that though, I am giving this one 3 stars. I do think it is the best book in the series. I liked this one more than Blood and Steel, definitely more than Vows and Ruins and Slaying the Shadow Prince, but for book 3 in a series, I would expect myself to have a higher level of investment. I would expect myself to be more emotionally attached to the characters and what's going on, and I just don't really have that with this series. I think book 2 killed that for me a little bit. So while I am interested to see where this goes, and I did enjoy my time with this one, I'm just not into it enough to really give it 4 stars. I do feel like that is the way that I tend to feel about romantasy a lot these days as well. I go into a series and I really enjoy book 1 and it makes me really hopeful, but I feel like instead of building upon the books that come in the series before, I do feel like a lot of romantasy series feel like they stay one note the entire way through, and so I'm not feeling that level of enthusiasm I feel like I should feel when I'm reading like books 3, 4, 5 in a series. But with the end of that book, we have also reached the end of this vlog. I did have a look at my spreadsheet and work out my TBR because the point of this vlog was to get through as many books on my TBR as possible. I did find another book on there that I'm just not going to read, so it didn't need to be on there anymore. Hi. Hi, I was kind of doing something like there, if that's all right. And then I also marked Wolfsong as read because even though I DNF'd it, it has ultimately taken it off my TBR, which is what is important when it comes to the TBR section of my spreadsheet. So we are ending this vlog with 28 books on my TBR and 21 books read. So I have 7 to go, but this does not include these 7 books that I need to add on for May, which we're about to roll into tomorrow. So I guess that's 14 books unread on my TBR, but I'm really satisfied with my progress in this vlog. I'm hoping to pick this up again like in a couple of weeks and try and get through another 3 books on my TBR just to really try and hold myself accountable to actually reading them. And I mean, having 7 books across 4 months on my TBR that aren't read, it's not the end of the world. I just, for my own peace of mind, would just really like to be on top of everything, and I'm not, which, to be honest, is just life these days. But if you've enjoyed this vlog, please do stay tuned. The next vlog that is going to appear on my channel is going to be a little bit of a secret. There is a hint in this frame somewhere, if you can see it, but the next vlog is not going to be a regular weekly vlog. I'm working with a little bit of a theme, I think, as long as it all goes to plan. So do stay tuned if you have enjoyed this one and you want to see more vlogs from me. But aside from that, guys, I do hope you've enjoyed this vlog if you've made it this far. If you have, then please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.